Have you ever seen one of those great looking logo treatments and thought, I could really use something like that in my project for my brand, but I don't really know After Effects that well. Or maybe I don't know After Effects at all. That's something that this course aims to solve. Hi, my name is Dave Bodie for Envato, and in this short course, you are going to learn how to customize a logo sting in After Effects. The lessons in this course have been designed for, well, someone just like you. Someone who's very new to After Effects, or maybe has never even used After Effects before. And in the next several lessons, you're going to get a brief tour of the After Effects interface, but not the whole interface, only what you need to know to customize this particular logo sting. You're going to learn how to customize your logo, change the colors to fit your brand and style, add some great sounding music, and export the project so that you can use that logo sting in a video editing application, or even just post it to the web. To get started, make sure to check out the next lesson, where you're going to get a look at the project files to find out exactly what you're going to be working with in this project. So check that out coming up next. Before we dive into After Effects, let's quickly have a look at the project files. This will help you better understand what we are going to be working with in the main project. So here on my desktop, I have the zip file, which hopefully you have also downloaded. And to get started with this project, I need to unzip it. So on Windows, I'm just going to right-click and choose Extract All. It's going to bring up this dialog box, and I'm just going to choose Extract. And it actually put the folder on another one of my screens, so I'm just going to copy it over here so you can see. And this is the folder that it opened up. You can see I have 3 folders and a music.txt file. You can see that this has a few links to some items on audiojungle.net. And these would be great candidates for the audio portion of this logo sting, which is something you're going to be learning later in this course. In fact, I'm going to be using one of these music tracks for the logo sting later in the project, and I'll show you that. But I just wanted to show you that that file's right there. Then you have a folder called Tutorial, and in here there are 3 very short silent tutorials. I think the total runtime is about, I don't know, 1 minute and 40 seconds maybe. This is fine if you are pretty experienced in After Effects, but if you're not, they're not going to be a tremendous amount of help. Then you have some preview videos here, and these are the stock permutations if you don't modify anything else and you just hit render. Actually, I think these already have been modified. Yeah. So some of these actually have some different logos already inserted, but when you see the project opened up in After Effects, these are the 6 main compositions, and they're kind of the 6 different variations you can get with this project. And then finally, you have your PM folder, and this is the actual After Effects project. Inside this folder, you have a footage folder, and inside of that footage folder, it will contain all of the assets that this After Effects project right here requires. So any footage, any audio, any image files, any graphics files, that'll all be contained in this footage folder. Now, actually, if I go to Properties here, it only has 2 files in it. So you don't really have to worry about that. I just wanted to point that out to you there. And that pretty much covers the project files for this logo sting. Coming up in the next lesson, you're going to open up this project, get a quick tour of the After Effects interface, and learn how the project is laid out. So check that out coming up next. In this lesson, you're going to open up the After Effects project, get a quick tour of the After Effects interface, and learn how this project is laid out. So I'm going to double click on this After Effects project file, and it's going to open right up in After Effects. All right, so when this project opens up, you'll get this pop-up right here. And all this is saying is that After Effects needs to convert this from an older version, which this project was saved in, to the newest version. Your only option is to click OK, so just click OK, and it'll open right up. All right, so this is the After Effects interface. If you've used After Effects before, you've seen this. If you're new to After Effects, this can be a little bit intimidating, but don't worry. You don't have to know every button and switch and tool in the interface to customize this and to get it to work for you. So what you're looking at here is what Adobe calls a workspace. It's a collection of panels and tools that are grouped in a specific way. And this workspace is customizable. So you can actually move it around. You can take these panels here and drag them out and dock them, move them around as you need to make this workspace work for you. Now, by default, this project opened up with an animation workspace. You don't have to know what that is. That's just this particular arrangement of panels. Now, to get it to be something that I think will be more helpful, I want you to come up here to the menu, click Window, Workspace, and then right down here, we're just going to select the standard workspace. The window will flash around for a second, and then it'll look nearly identical, but it's actually a little bit more simple. There are a few less panels in this layout here. So what are you looking at here? First, let's check out this project panel here. The project panel is where you are going to access any assets for your project, whatever they are, video, audio, graphics. They're going to be located in this project panel. You can see there's a folder called Assets, and if you drill down by clicking this little triangle here, you'll see there are more folders in here. There's a few image files. There's a few compositions, more on that in a second. And there are these right here, which are compositions. Down here, this is the timeline panel, and these are where those compositions open up. Now, I'm going to explain more about compositions coming up in the next lesson. But really quick, this project opens up with 8 compositions that are already open for you. There's actually a bunch more. If you open up this assets and look in the comp folder, you can see there's a bunch of different compositions in there. That's what this little icon is right here. That's a comp icon. But by default, we have one called Your Logo, one called Settings, one called PM01. And if you'll remember back to the last lesson, that corresponds with one of the preview files. So these 6 compositions right here are actually the final compositions. When you make your customizations, these are the things that you're actually going to render out. Up here, you have your comp viewer. You can see this panel is now highlighted because it's in blue here. And this is where After Effects displays what's happening in the composition. Without this, you can't really see what's going on. I'm going to jump back to the Your Logo comp and click inside here and drag this thing right here, which is the current time indicator, because it was actually, the current time indicator was outside the bounds of this timeline here, so it wasn't showing anything. But if you just click and drag, or if you hit Home on the keyboard, that'll bring the CTI back to the beginning of the timeline. So in this comp viewer here, you can use your middle mouse wheel if you have one. If you're on a touchpad, you can do a 2-finger kind of scroll gesture. And that will zoom in and out of the comp, and that can be handy for looking at details. If you have a middle mouse button, if you click and hold that middle mouse button, you can drag the comp in the comp viewer. So if you want to look at this upper corner, for whatever reason, it's all black, but say, for example, we were in this comp right here, and you wanted to look at this upper corner, you could, and that's how you get there. You click and hold the middle mouse button, and you drag it around. And then to zoom out, you can just use your mouse wheel. In addition to using your middle mouse button to click and hold, you can also press and hold the space bar and just use the left click to move the frame around the viewer. This also works down here in the timeline window. Let's say you were zoomed in like this and you wanted to navigate. You can press and hold the space bar and then click and drag your mouse. You can also do the same thing with the middle mouse button, click and drag. Or you can see down here, there's a bunch of tools. Right here, you can select the percentage that you want this viewed at, so 100%, or you can just select Fit to Comp, and that'll just fit it to whatever size you have this. And you can click and drag here on the bounds to make this a little bit bigger if you want. I'm actually recording this course at 720, which is a little bit small to be working in After Effects, but it's better for you to be viewing it on a smaller screen if I record these videos at a smaller resolution, because the text is going to appear a little bit bigger and it's going to be a little bit easier for you to read. Now, to reset the comp, which can be sometimes annoying, but if you want to center it back in the view, you can just come right up here to this Tools panel and double-click this hand tool, and that will recenter the comp in the comp viewer. Now, speaking of tools, there are a handful of tools. There's actually a hand tool located right up here in this toolbar. There's a selection tool, a hand tool, a zoom tool, rotation tool, unified camera tool, pan behind tool, rectangle tool, pen tool, type tool, brush tool, clone tool, eraser tool, roto brush, and puppet pin tool. Sound confusing? It might be, but don't worry. The only tools that we're really going to be working with here are the selection tool and maybe the horizontal type tool. None of those other tools we're going to need to worry about at this point. Over on this side, there are a few more useful panels. There's an info panel here. This will tell you exactly where your cursor is located. You can see the XY coordinates there. If you hover your cursor over an item, it'll give you the RGB and alpha value. So you can see right here, there is no RGB and the alpha is 0. It's not displaying nothing. It's actually telling you that this is transparent. Now, it doesn't look transparent at this point, and that's because right down here in the comp viewer, there's a toggle transparency grid button. And if you click that, you can see that it turns on this checkerboard pattern, which shows you that this is actually transparent. You can see that even though the background changed from black to this checkerboard pattern, in the info display here, this didn't actually change. It's still showing you there's no RGB value because there's no pixels here, and it has an alpha of 0. As soon as I hover over something, you will see that now we get RGB, so it's giving you color value in red, green, and blue. And in this particular case, it's showing you that the alpha is 255. Now, alpha is the transparency channel. So when it's 0, it's fully transparent. And in 8-bit mode, when it's 255, it means it's fully opaque. Again, don't let that confuse you. It's just something to take note of now, and it'll make sense more later, I promise. There's an audio panel here. If you want to check levels, there's an align panel right here. That's going to be useful for aligning your logo, which you're going to look at coming up in another lesson. There's a preview panel here, and effects and presets and library, and there's something, I guess it's just those two, but when they're squished like that, you get this little double caret arrow because we can actually stack more panels in there, which I'll show you coming up in another lesson. So that's it for the basic, quick and dirty tour of After Effects. These windows and panels are just the basics. If you look in the menu here, you'll see that there's actually a few more. But again, you don't have to worry about any of those, and you don't have to concern yourself about what they may or may not do, because you're just going to be focused on this project panel, these timeline panels, and these comps in here, and the comp viewer. Coming up in the next lesson, you're going to dive a little bit deeper into this project and get a better understanding of exactly how it's put together with layers and compositions. So check that out coming up next. In this lesson, you're going to get a better understanding of layers and compositions as we dive deeper into exactly how this project is put together. In the previous lesson, I mentioned that these are compositions, sometimes shortened as comps. You'll see that in this assets folder. This folder here is called comps. Comp is just short for composition. Now, a comp is very similar to a sequence in a video editing application. You can kind of think of it like a container, and you can put your assets in that container and you can manipulate them over time. That's why there's a timeline here. I'm just going to make this a little shorter here so we can see the timeline a little bit better. I'm also going to turn off this transparency grid because that's making my eyes completely bug out. So, a composition, it's a container. You can put stuff into it. What kind of stuff? Well, you can put video footage. You can put graphics in it. In fact, that's what's in this comp right here. This comp, which is called Your Logo, only has one thing in it, and that is this envato.ai file. That's a file that was created in Adobe Illustrator, and After Effects can use that no problem. Doesn't have to be converted to anything else. That type of file is a vector graphics file, meaning if you click this button right here, this is the continuously rasterize button, and then I select this layer. You don't have to follow along, but watch what happens when I hit S on the keyboard and then I scale this up past 100%. Now I'm just going to change the resolution here to auto, and I'm going to look at this at full resolution. So this is 100% resolution. And check out the scale. It's at 738%. Now, watch what happens when I uncheck this continuously rasterize button. That looks gross. We have these really jaggy edges and it's blurry and it's pixelated. With regular old rasterized graphics, things like PNGs, JPEGs, Photoshop files, when you scale them up past 100%, they can look nasty. If it's just a little bit past 100%, probably not a big deal, but you get to 150, 200, things are gonna probably look pretty gross unless you blur them out. So these vector graphics are really cool because you can scale them up a lot. Now, in this particular example, that's probably not what you want to do. In fact, I'm just going to undo all of that and put it back the way it was before. But I just wanted to show you that in this comp, it has a vector graphics file, and you can do that. You can scale it up really, really big. Now, in addition to footage and graphic files, you can also have audio, lots of audio. They can be sound effects. It can be a music track. It can be dialogue, although After Effects is not really great at manipulating audio. It has some basic audio functionality, which you're going to learn about coming up later in the course. You can also put layers that are generated by After Effects itself. So if you right-click in a blank area here, go up to New, we can insert a text layer, we can insert a solid, we can insert a light. This is a light that works with 3D or quasi-3D elements inside of After Effects. You can put an After Effects camera in this comp. You can put a null object, a shape layer, an adjustment layer, a Photoshop file, even a Cinema 4D file. Now, a Photoshop file and a Cinema 4D file are not things that are generated necessarily inside of After Effects. But all these other ones here, text, solid, light, camera, null, shape, and adjustment layer are. Those are items that you do not import from a folder outside of After Effects. Those are layers that After Effects can generate all on its own. They're very useful, but we're not going to get into them in this course. Just wanted to point that out to you because you're going to see those used in some of these other comps. Now, why is it called a composition? Well, that's because you can put multiple items in here and you can composite them all together. Composition comes from composite. For example, I could duplicate this, I could scale it way up, and I could composite this over this other layer here. Now, you don't need to follow along with that. I just wanted to show you that as an example. And these compositions can be very complex. You can have something as simple as a comp with just one layer in it, like you have here, or if you jump over here to this PM01 and just pull this up here, you can see that this comp actually has 45 layers in there. This is an adjustment layer here. If I scroll down, this has got a null and it's got an After Effects camera. And then inside of this comp, there are actually a bunch of compositions. So you can nest compositions inside of compositions. And if I take one of these comps, let's say your logo side 01, and I double click on it, that's going to open up that comp. You can see right over here, your logo side 01 has been opened up. I'm just going to fit that so you can see in this comp. You can see that in this comp, there are 4 layers, and each one of those is a composition. 3 of those are labeled your logo, which is the first comp that we were looking at. If I double click this, it's going to open up your logo. So try and follow along here. Inside of this your logo side 01 is your logo, and there's a few different copies of that, which is referencing this composition right here. Now, your logo side 01 is used in this composition, PM01, and it's used a bunch of different times. It's kind of layered on top of it. And then if we look at PM01 cameras, PM01, so this comp is inside of this comp right here. So this comp has this comp in it. Now, it doesn't show up as all those layers because it's just kind of collapsed down and you just get this one layer right here. But inside of here, if I double click on it, is all this stuff. And inside of this one layer here are these layers. Inside of this your logo comp is your logo. So that's basically how this entire project is put together. It seems complex, but the only things that you are going to be modifying are these 2 comps right here, this one called settings and this one called your logo. But I just wanted to show you that that's how this project is built. If we look at, I'm going to jump back to PM01 here. And if you look at your logo top, double click on it, you can see that this has a bunch more your logos in it. And over on the timeline, you can see that some of them have been trimmed up. Some of them are stacked on top of each other right here. It's a bunch of different things going on. So compositions can be very complex, but again, you don't have to let that confuse you or overwhelm you, because all we're going to be looking at to make the modifications are this your logo comp and settings comp. So you may have figured out by now, if I make a change in this comp, let's say I just move this like that. Watch what happens when I jump over to the PM01 comp. Whoa, did you see that? This just moved. Now I'll show you that again. We'll move it back. I'll just undo that. And then watch what happens when I jump over here. It'll update and it'll move back. That's how we're going to move forward. And coming up in the next lesson, I'm going to show you how to replace this Envato logo with a logo of your own. So check that out coming up next. To make this logo sting work, you're going to need to replace the logo that was provided in the example with a logo of your own. Now, this can be as simple as basic text or a graphic from Photoshop, Illustrator, or even a PNG. In this lesson, you're going to learn exactly how to do it. All right, so as I mentioned, and as you saw in the last lesson, if I make a modification in this your logo comp, it's going to update in all of these other comps. If I click over to PM03, you'll see the exact same thing. So in order to get your logo in here, all we have to do is get rid of this logo and put your logo in its place. Now, if your logo is pretty basic, let's say it's just a text logo, you can do that right inside of After Effects. As long as you have your fonts installed and you know exactly how to build your logo. For example, if you could make it in Photoshop using the text tool in Photoshop, it's going to work almost exactly the same in After Effects, unless you're doing something kind of fancy with layers and drawing stuff. But if it's just a basic text logo, check out how easy this is. I'm going to grab the text tool by just clicking on it here. I'm going to click inside the comp viewer, and I'm just going to type my logo, Bodhi Media. Then I'm going to hit the enter on the number pad. I'm going to switch back to the selection tool, which is also V on the keyboard. That's the keyboard shortcut. And I'm going to position this roughly where this Envato logo is. Now, there's a feature inside of After Effects that will allow you to snap this. If you hold Control down while you click and drag, you can see on my little keyboard mouse click viewer thing here, Control and then click. And as I drag, that layer will snap to this Envato layer. You can snap the center point, the edge, or whatever, but you want to basically line it up exactly where this Envato logo is, because in these other comps, especially these PM01 camera comps, there are cameras in here and they're impossible to see because that paragraph panel just opened up and it made the timeline really smaller. So I'm going to grab this paragraph panel. I'm going to click and drag and reposition it and just dock it right up here. And then I'm going to make these a little smaller by clicking and dragging, just like that. Okay, good. So because these cameras in this comp and these other camera comps here get pretty tight on the logo, if I don't position my logo, let me drag the CTI back here so I can see roughly where this Envato logo is, then those tight shots are not going to work. For example, let me just shut this Envato layer off by clicking the eyeball right here. Then I'll make it disappear. And then if I just move this up, like you might think, oh, actually my logo looks pretty cool there. Well, maybe, but if we go like right here in this PM01 cameras comp and we look at the beginning right here, you can see that the camera's really not focused on it. And that's because the camera is more or less looking at the center of the frame in this PM01 comp right here. So I really want to get, and weirdly, the CTI keeps jumping off of this timeline here, but we'll just click and drag, put it right back there. I want to get this right in the center. Now, if you've deleted this Envato layer, no worries. You can come over here to the Align panel, just make some room here, and then we can click this Align horizontally, and this is going to align to the center of the comp here on the horizontal axis. And then right here, Align vertically, this is going to align it to the center line vertically in the comp. And that's pretty much where you need it. So if we check in these other comps here, especially these camera comps, you're going to see, oh yeah, that's looking just fine. And things are right where you want. Now, if you want to make it a little bit bigger, you can. You can select the layer, hit S on the keyboard, and then just scale this up. Now, by default, your text may be left aligned. And if so, when you scale that up, it's going to be scaling in from this little reticle looking thing here. This is called the anchor point. So to make things easier for you, if you do use this kind of text layer method, I'm just going to undo that. I want to show you a keyboard shortcut that's going to make this a little bit easier. With the layer selected, hit Control, Alt, Home. And that's going to put the anchor point dead center in your layer, right there. And now, when you scale it up, it's going to scale from that anchor point, which is in the center of the layer. And so your layer is not going to move from the center of the comp, which is what you want. And now if we check in this PM01 cameras and we look at one of these beginning camera shots, you can see, oh yeah, it's looking right. It's big in the frame, but now it's kind of filling up more of the frame. And actually that looks all right. It's kind of tight and then cuts back to this kind of center shot here, and it's larger than the Envato logo, but it's looking all right. That's looking good right there. And that's looking fine there as well. So it works, and that's fine. Now let's say your logo was not text. So I'm just going to get rid of this here. Let's say that it's something made in Illustrator. And in fact, I have an example that I'm going to load up right now. So I just opened up Adobe Illustrator, and this is a logo that I downloaded from Envato Elements. And I'm just going to leave this like it is, but I want to show you how to use something that came from Illustrator that's not been prepped for After Effects in After Effects, if that made sense. A couple of things about this logo graphic here are not going to work for what we have going on in After Effects. For one, this has a color background on it, and so that's not going to work. Another issue is this is in CMYK color space, and After Effects works with RGB. So to fix that, really, really easy. We can come up here to File. We'll go down to Document Color Mode and just select RGB. So really quickly, before we go any further, I'm just going to save this, Control-Shift-S, and I'm just going to do _RGB and then save. Click OK. Speaking of saving, now would be a great time to save your After Effects project so you don't run into problems down the road if, for whatever reason, After Effects crashes and you don't have it saved. So jump back over to After Effects, and you can just use the keyboard shortcut Control-Shift-S to do a save as, and then you can take your project and maybe rename it instead of converted. You can just do something like O1, and that'll work fine. You might also want to turn on autosave if it's not turned on already. So come up here to the menu, go to Edit, Preferences, and then right up here to Autosave, and then make sure autosave is enabled. And you can set this to save every, I don't know, whatever you think is reasonable. For me, 8 minutes works okay. And then you can set a maximum number of project versions. I have 3, that works out fine for me. And then press OK. And that'll make sure that if there is an After Effects crash, which does happen from time to time, that you'll never lose more than 8 minutes, because that'll create an autosave folder next to where you saved your project, and every 8 minutes, you'll have an autosave automatically backed up, and that will be very handy. All right. Now, if I go over here to the Layers panel, what I'm looking for is to find this background layer and delete it. I'm just going to uncheck the eyeballs here until I find what I'm looking for. Ah, there it is, right here. And then I'm going to just click this and drag it to the little trash can and delete it. If I save this, Control-S, and I'll just exit out of Illustrator. Over in After Effects here, in the Project panel, if I hit Control-I, it's going to bring up the Import dialog box. Alternatively, you can just double-click in a blank area here, and that's going to bring up the same dialog box. I made a copy of that and put it on the desktop so I could find it easier. Ah, there we go. I'm just going to choose Import. And that's it. Now, if I pull this down into this comp from the project panel, there we go. There's my layer. It's that easy. Now, it is looking a little bit small. We can just kind of preview this. Right? That looks okay. Let's look at the PM01 cameras layer. It's looking all right. That text there is a little bit small. I'd like to see that bigger. If I jump back to this Your Logo comp, and I look at the scale by hitting S on the keyboard with that layer selected, you're going to see that the scale is at 100%. So if I scale that up a little bit, that's going to work. But if I view this at 100% here, that's not going to be as sharp as if I turned on the continuously rasterize button there. You can see a little different. It's hard to see. I have to actually zoom up on it a little bit more. You can see that's continuously rasterized and it's nice and sharp. So I'm going to actually make this a little bit bigger and kind of align it visually to the center. Now, if you want more help with kind of some guidelines here, right in the comp viewer, click this button right here and then choose Title Action Safe. That'll bring up some guides for you. If you kind of goof up the alignment, you're not sure that it's exactly in the center, again, don't worry about it. Just come over here to the Align panel and click Align Horizontally with the center option here, not Align Left or Align Right. and then align vertically. And now it's centered up right in the comp. You see that right there. So let's check how that looks in PM01 cameras. Ah, that's looking nice. I like that. A little bit bigger, and it's looking pretty cool. Now, the only trick is that if you use a logo that's orientated like that, these camera moves may not be focusing in on the text. Now, you might be okay with that, or you might not be. Really quick, if you wanted to change that, select this null layer right here, then hit U on the keyboard. This is going to bring up all of the properties on this layer that have been modified. If you click this little arrow right here, this is going to go to the next keyframe, which happens to be the last keyframe. For the position, we're just going to change the value here. So this is X, this is Y, and this is Z. And what we want to do is move the Y up. So just click and drag right here until you get that text kind of more in the frame. Now we can do the same thing to the beginning. So we'll just click this arrow right here, go to previous keyframe. And then I'm going to click and drag on this second set of numbers here. This is the Y. Again, it's X, Y, Z. And just position this so that the text is in the frame. And now when it plays, you're going to be able to see the text and it's going to be looking much better. All right, so just a really simple modification there. And that'll work. You can do the same thing here to this third set of cameras, right? If this is not as in the frame as you would like, I think that actually works okay. But if you wanted to make a quick adjustment, press U on the keyboard. We're going to go to the last keyframe. And again, I know that you may not fully understand all about keyframes, but just follow along and this will do exactly what you want it to do. So we'll press this arrow here to go to this keyframe right here, and then click and drag in the Y position to get that just up a little bit more in the frame. And then we'll click this arrow right here, go to previous keyframe to bring the CTI right here to this keyframe. And then we'll do the same thing and just click and drag on this Y in the position, and that will fix that camera so that it's more focused on this text part of the logo, if that's what you want. If not, just leave it the way it was before, and it'll look great. So that pretty much does it for this lesson. Coming up in the next lesson, you're going to learn how to modify the colors to fit your style and your brand. You might like the colors in the original example in this project, but it's more likely that you're going to want to modify them to match your brand and your style. And in this lesson, you're going to learn how. So this is actually really simple. Come right over here to this settings comp, which is already opened up, and then click in the timeline here, bring the CTI over, or you can hit home and that'll bring the CTI to the left so we can actually see what's going on. And then I'm just going to make some more space here by shrinking the timeline just a little bit. So it just makes this a little bit bigger. And then up here, right next to the project panel, is the effects controls panel. And if you click on this controls layer, it brings up all the effects that are on this layer. And you can use those effects to modify the colors. And it's really simple. So let's say for this color A, we want a blue, but we actually want more of kind of this light blue. And if you have brand specific colors, you can use the color picker here to pick those if you have it opened up in another window, or you can use the library window. So come up here to window and then, oh, the library panel is already open. Oh, there it is. If it's not open, you can find it up here, window, library. It's actually right there. And you can see I have some colors that are loaded up here for some of my clients. And if you want access to these color themes, you can just go to color.adobe.com. This used to be called Cooler. And you can log in, and then you can create a theme here with your colors, your exact RGB colors, and you can save that, save your color theme. And when you do, it'll show up inside this library panel right here, and then you have really easy access to that. Alternatively, you can just type in the RGB values if you know them, or the hex color code right down here, and enter your colors in that way. For right now, I'm just going to eyeball this and pick some fun and interesting colors. So I'll leave that blue. I think that looks okay. Actually, I don't like that because there's blue in the original logo. So I'm going to pick kind of a bright orange. And then for this pink, I'm going to pick purple. Yes, I like that. And then for the background color, it's not really super high contrast. It's actually very similar to some of the colors that's used in this logo here. And that doesn't look super awesome. So maybe a lighter background would be more appropriate. Yes, that looks a little better. And then for the background shadow, I might pick, I don't know, a lighter gray, something like that. That's better. So really simple to make those modifications to the colors in the comp. That's really all there is to it. Now, if we jump into these other comps here and scroll through by clicking and dragging with the CTI, you're going to see that all those colors have been updated. Coming up in the next lesson, you're going to learn how to add a basic musical sting to these comps to make it sound as good as it looks. Music and sound effects can really make a logo sting like this pop, but this project doesn't come with any music to work with. In this lesson, I'll show you where to find an appropriate music sting and how to get it in your project. In the project folder, there is a music.txt file, which has some text links to audiojungle.net, which is a good place to start looking for a little music sting that'll go with this logo. So this is audiojungle.net. This is this item right here. You can see ends in 034 right there. And I'll play that for you so you can hear what that sounds like. So if you like this, you can purchase it for $7. But if you don't, you can search on here for other logo stings and find something that I'm sure will work for your project. I've already purchased this. And so I'm going to import it into my project. I can just double click in the project panel right here. And on the desktop, I will navigate to that audio file, click import, and there we go. Now it's in the project. So if I wanted to add that to this PM01 comp, I could. I'm just going to drag that right in here. It doesn't really matter what layer it goes on. In fact, I'm just going to click and drag and put it on the top because there's no picture in it. If you look over here, there's a little toggle for the audio, but there's nothing for the video portion of this asset because it doesn't have one. It's only audio. I'm just going to make some more room in the timeline here. If I select this audio file and I hit LL, you can actually see the waveform here. And all of these comps are actually a bit shorter than this audio file. So you can create a little fade here in After Effects. It's not perhaps the most sophisticated way to do it, but if you don't want to mess around with another application to edit this audio, you can get it done right here. I'm going to move the CTI to the end of the project. You can also just hit end on the keyboard. Then I'm going to hit Alt-Shift-L on the keyboard, which is going to insert a keyframe, specifically an audio levels keyframe. And right now, that keyframe is not doing anything. I could put a bunch more keyframes, but as long as they're all set to 0 decibels, is not going to change the level of this audio clip. What I want to do is I want to create a fade here. So I want to pick a point in time earlier than the end of this, let's say like here, and I want to add a keyframe. So I'm just going to click right here, add keyframe, and that's going to put another keyframe at 0 decibels. And so between this keyframe and this keyframe, I want a fade. So all I need to do is come to this keyframe right here, and then pull this level down to something like -96. I'll press enter. And you'll see that the waveform actually updated there. You can actually get negative numbers down to -192, but something like -60 might actually work just fine. If you go to -192, you'll see that this fade actually ends a good bit sooner than we need it to. So something like -60 might work. And again, this is not the most refined way to do an edit like this, but it does work. Lastly, you can click and drag and make a selection of these 2 keyframes, and then on your keyboard, press F9. What that's going to do is change those from that diamond shape, which is a linear keyframe, and changes it to this hourglass shape, which is a Bezier keyframe. Hitting F9 on the keyboard actually does an easy ease keyframe, which means it eases out of the first keyframe and eases into the second keyframe, and sort of makes for a more smooth transition, which is going to be a little bit smoother than that linear keyframe, which is just going to start moving at a constant rate of speed at this point until it gets to this next keyframe. Again, you don't have to understand exactly what that does, but just check out what the waveform looks like. And then I'll undo that. Kind of hard to see because, there we go. Let me redo that. Yeah, okay, so it's kind of subtle. If I undo that, you can see that the waveform is going to fade out here. It's going to lose a little less energy right here. If I redo that change, Control-Shift-Z, then it's going to maintain a little bit more energy here in the fade, and then it's going to kind of drop off here. It's a little bit smoother. Again, After Effects is not what you want to be using for audio edits, but for something this simple, you can make it work. Without fading that out, if I just delete all the keyframes by clicking this stopwatch, you can see that when it gets to the end, there's still going to be audio there, and it's going to sound kind of clunky. Let me just play it from here. It automatically loops. I'm going to make it not do that. If I go to the preview panel right here, I can just click that once, and that will set it to not loop. And so now if I play from this point by hitting spacebar, you can hear the audio just drops. If I undo that last change, it's going to put my keyframes back. So now when I preview it, I'm going to get this nice fade. Right? Things sound smoother. We could even move this one back a little bit and then change this from this Bezier keyframe here. If I hold Control and then click it, it'll change it to a linear keyframe. That might make it even smoother. Yeah, I think that would work. And so that's pretty much it. What I did there was I added audio to this PM01 comp, but that PM01 comp is used in this PM01 cameras comp. So now if you look down at the bottom, you'll see that this layer now has an audio toggle because this has audio in it. Now, one thing you could do to give you some more options down the road is in your PM01 comp here, select your music track, right-click on it, and choose Precompose. I'm going to name it to Music, and then I'm going to choose Move All Attributes into the new composition, and then click OK. So what that's going to do, if I double-click on this music comp, is now I have my audio clip here. If I hit U on the keyboard, I still have that nice fade, which is going to work really nice for this PM01 and PM01 cameras. But now if I want to add that same music clip to PM02, without having to go through all those steps, I can just pull in this one music comp here. That music track is now going to work for this comp as well. Do the same thing for PM03. Just drag this right in here. And if I play this, you can hear that the music is working just fine. The benefit of this is if you wanted to change the music, you could just go back to your music comp and replace this music with a different track. And that would update in all of these other comps because they're all referencing this comp right here, music. And inside of here is this audio clip right here. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility down the road. All right, now your project is looking really nice. It's sounding great. The next step is to render this out so that you can use it in a video application or just post it on the web. And that's what you're going to learn in the next lesson. Now that you have your logo sting modified with your logo and a short musical sting, it's time to get it out of After Effects so you can use it in other projects or maybe even just post it to the web. In this lesson, you'll learn how to set up a render and export your video. If I want to render out one of these comps, what I'm going to do is select the comp that I want, and then I'm going to hit Control M on the keyboard. And that's going to add it to the render queue, which opens up here in the timeline panel. Now, alternatively, let me just close that music comp there. Alternatively, you can just come up here to Comp and then choose Add to Render Queue. But you can see the keyboard shortcut is right there, Control M. Either way, it does the same exact thing. I'm just going to delete that one there. All right, so the comp is in the render queue now. Now, there's a few different ways that you can render it from here. You can render it right inside of After Effects, or you can queue this comp to render in Adobe Media Encoder. Most of the time, that's the better option because it'll render faster. And if you're still working in After Effects, it frees you up to make some more modifications, because if you use the After Effects renderer, as soon as you hit this render button, it's going to lock you out of making any changes to this comp or any of the other comps while it's rendering. A few things down here. If you're going to use the After Effects renderer, which is totally fine, what you first want to do is come down here to the Output To section and click on that little link and select an appropriate place for this to render to. Now, I'm just going to render this out to the folder on the desktop, and I'm going to create a new folder, which on Windows is right here, but I just used a shortcut, Control-Shift-N, and I'll name this Output. It's really clever. You can rename it right here. I'm just going to leave it as PM01. Make sure that's going to save inside of this folder here, and then click Save. In the Output module, this is where you can choose from various After Effects presets. Now, you'll see some that you don't have because I've made several of these. And not all of these are going to work for you. You can go into Custom, and under Custom, you can choose the format that you want. Now, you may be looking for something like H.264, but you're not going to find that in here. There used to be an option to encode an H.264 in the After Effects renderer, but they recently removed that. You can still do that if you want, but you have to use Adobe Media Encoder, which I'll show you in just a second. What I would recommend, if you are going to be using this in another video application, say Adobe Premiere or whatever, and if you're going to be adding this to the beginning or the end of your video, you want to use an intermediate codec. H.264 is a delivery codec. It's not the best choice for being recompressed because it's already pretty compressed to begin with. So an intermediate codec is usually much higher bit rate, uncompressed audio, and very, very, very little picture detail loss. What I usually use is a format of QuickTime, and then under the format options, I choose GoPro Cineform. You can see there's a few options here. You can also do DNX HD or DNX HR, which is another good intermediate codec, with a quality level of 4, and that's usually fine. So I'm going to leave it set to QuickTime again and use the GoPro Cineform. And then if I wanted to, I would just click this render button right here and it would render that file. However, like I mentioned before, probably the best way to do it is to click this Q in AME, which is Adobe Media Encoder button, and that will launch Adobe Media Encoder. Now, while it's launching, I'll just mention that this output module here is only relevant if you're going to use the After Effects renderer, because as you'll see in just a second, when I pull in Adobe Media Encoder, here's my project. You can see After Effects PM01, and I don't know why I put another 1 there. Doesn't matter. But under Format, it's H.264, and it's set to match source high bitrate. By default, when you send it over to Adobe Media Encoder, it will be in the format of whatever it is that you used Adobe Media Encoder for last. So the last thing I used this for was H.264, and I just had it set to the match source high bitrate preset. The output file is correct, but the output module that I set up here doesn't translate over to Adobe Media Encoder. That's because Adobe Media Encoder actually has a lot more format options. So if I wanted to set that up exactly the same, what I would have to do is come down here to QuickTime under Format. And then there's actually a preset that I use, which is GoPro Cineform RGB 12-bit with alpha. That one is very good. Also, this one, GoPro Cineform YUV 10-bit, is also fine. Either one of those are really good intermediate codecs that you will see no picture loss at all. They'll be great for pulling into Premiere or whatever video application you're working on and recompressing that to a delivery codec, which would be H.264. Now, if you're just going to take this logo and like upload it to YouTube or something, then H.264 is probably what you're going to be after. And under H.264, there are some presets for things like YouTube. So you can just select that there. And then all you need to do is hit this start button right here, and you're off to the races. That's pretty much all there is to it. Now, this will take a little bit to encode. Now, depending on your hardware, this could be anywhere from a couple of minutes. You can see right now it's giving me an estimate of 3 minutes and 40 seconds. If you have faster hardware, this will fly right through in probably 90 seconds or so. But if you have slower hardware, maybe an older machine, maybe a laptop, this could take 10, 20 minutes depending on the comp, especially if I rendered one of those other ones with the cameras. If it had depth of field enabled, you could be looking at like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours or more, just for this 6-second little clip here. That's just the way it goes. It's one of the things that you just sort of have to accept about creating these really cool looking graphics. Even though they don't take a lot of time to modify and customize, they can take a pretty good amount of time to export and render. That's it. I can click right on this file in Adobe Media Encoder. It's going to bring that up there, and now I can play it. All right, that looked very, very cool. And it only took a couple minutes to export. That about wraps it up for this video. Coming up in the next lesson, you're going to get a few more tips and tricks for even more customization. Congratulations, you've made it to the finish line. If you followed along with the lessons in this course, you now have a great looking logo sting to use for your projects. And if you are a newer user to After Effects, or maybe have never used After Effects before, that's something to be proud of. So let's talk about some further customizations that you can do for this project. In one of the lessons, if you recall, you tweaked the camera angles to better frame up that taller logo. Well, along those same lines, you can get in there and experiment even further with those camera angles. Maybe add some more keyframes. Maybe change up the camera angles drastically. So instead of just making a small adjustment for kind of the vertical framing for that logo, you can get in there and really tilt that camera up and get a really interesting angle for some of those cameras in some of those comps. And that would be a fairly simple kind of customization that you can now handle. What you might want to do before you start experimenting with the project is create another save as for the project. So File, Save As, and then name it something like PM underscore, I don't know, experimental or something like that. And that way the original project file remains untouched and you can get in there and poke around and not worry about kind of messing up what you had before. In addition to getting in there and modifying those camera keyframes, you can get under the hood a little bit and start poking around and seeing what does what in those comps. So you can take a look at something like PM01 and then check out the layers that are in that Your Logo top. And actually look at the layers and find out what they're doing. There's a solo button that's right next to the layer visibility switch. You can turn that on and see what each individual layer is doing. Then you can select a layer, hit U on the keyboard, and that will reveal any keyframes or any things that have been modified on the layer, whether they be effects or other keyframes that have been added for things like position or opacity or even scale. And that'll give you an idea of how the looks that you're seeing on your screen are put together. You're going to see what effects are used, you're going to see what keyframes are used, and you can get in there and mess around. If you see some keyframe values from like 40 to 80, just experiment with those. Maybe add another keyframe in there with a different value and see what it does. It's kind of a time of experimentation, poke around, see what it does. I believe in the philosophy that you learn best by doing. So get in there and mess around with stuff, change some stuff around, and see how that updates in the comp to create something a little bit more interesting for yourself. The worst case is you get in there and you start poking around under the hood and you learn a little bit more about what effects were used to create whatever's going on screen, and you learn how some of the other controls work in After Effects. But the best case is that you make something even more interesting than you had before. So I think it's kind of a win-win situation there. So that about wraps it up for this course. I want to thank you again for watching and following along in the lessons. I hope you learned something new, something interesting, and I hope you had some fun along the way. Again, my name is Dave Bodie for Envato. Keep on experimenting, and I'll see you around.